Good evening. In the cinema centenary year, we're coming to you from Pinewood Studios, a location close to the heart of British filmmaking for nearly 60 years. Hitchcock worked here. David Lean recreated Victorian squalor for Oliver Twist. Michael Powell's Peeping Tom stalked his victims at Pinewood. Sigourney Weaver battled aliens. And soon Brian De Palma will be sending Tom Cruise on Mission Impossible on the massive 007 stage. So we're in a good space this year. Now, down to business. The planned release of Oliver Stone's hyperkinetic natural-born killers in Britain last November was greeted with predictable howls of rage from sections of the press, who equally predictably hadn't seen it. The film that Stone himself modestly describes as a Swiftian Voltairean caricature of our worst nightmare was about to open in London when some American journalists attributed a number of copycat killings to its malign influence. Our own tabloids, as always an infallible guide through the moral maze, declared the movie unfit for Britain. James Furman, director of the British Board of Film Classification, promptly announced that he couldn't pass the film in such hysterical circumstances and locked it in the cupboard for a couple of months. But once the tabloids found new threats to civilization as we know it, Stone's killers got parole, and we can finally see these crazy kids for ourselves.
When I read Quentin's script 3 years ago practically now, it was perfect because it was the mix of the gangster movie, criminal subclass, road movie, but seen through the eyes of media. So this was a chance to do something with a 90s sort of intersection. And I think that's really what motivated me to go for it. And then when we got into it, it turned into another movie.
Tarantino largely disowned it, and he made it quite clear that Stone had done a great deal to it. I can imagine the situation in a Tarantino film because Tarantino would have let the actors go. He would have let them go and he would have given them great dialogue because that, above all, is what Tarantino can do. And he would actually have filmed in a far simpler way.
I see almost none of Tarantino left in there. You know, the Tarantino stuff in Pulp Fiction is just hilarious. You know, it's the same idea that, okay, let's take these like killers and make them seem in some way attractive. But he does it because the language is so great, whereas in this, they're just idiots.
You make every day feel like kindergarten.
All right!
I think we should get a whole bunch of stuff because I need a whole new wardrobe. Because I'm a new woman. A new woman!
The movie was done in a metaphoric, satiric way, in the sense of trying to go towards all this surface of events of the 1990s. Tonya Harding, Lorena Bobbitt, the Menendez brothers, O.J. Simpson, this swirling sensationalism.
This is Wayne Gale, resuming live from Tongerville, where you can tell by the blood and carnage all around me that the final chapter in the book called Mickey and Mallory has yet to be written.
And Oliver Stone is sort of saying, if he's saying anything, that we ought to ban television in this country, I suppose. But if we banned television, he would have so much less fun. He isn't really asking us to ban television. He's sort of saying, I'm smart enough to understand it, of course, but isn't it terrible to think that all those millions of idiots out there are subject to the way television perverts them?
Do you think that those nitwits out there in Zombieland remember anything? This is junk food for the brains. It's, you know, filler, fodder, whatever.
It's a real sort of right-wing movie in that the right wing in the United States blames everything on the media. You know, if there's a plane crash, it's the media's fault. You know, if there's a hurricane somewhere, if the Mississippi floods its banks, it's the media's fault. And that's what he says in this movie.
The furor over violence, I don't understand, because the film is not as graphic as many other films that have preceded it. It's more the suggestion of violence that's at the root of this film, the suggestion of chaos.
Demolition Man is a much more violent movie than Natural Born Killers. You know, it's, you know, and many movies are like that. Terminator is a much more violent movie. It's just endless images of violence. But nobody talks about Terminator or Demolition Man as reflecting anything about the American people, because they're just dumb movies. Whereas because it's Oliver Stone, people sort of, in some sense, take it seriously.
The tabloid press, particularly in England, was totally destructive to this picture and set up a climate of misunderstanding where they made vastly false claims, as they always have. They create a market of sensationalism, much like pictured in the movie, which is to say that movies and videos create the violence, which is far from the truth. The violence is created socially in genetics and in environment and in neglect of inner cities and in arms sales and in domestic arms sales. This movie, we try to sort of become conscious of the fact that you're watching an action movie and that you're sort of deconstructing the genre at the same time, and you're aware of your own participation and your own relationship to violence and towards television, in fact, because it is like watching 2 weeks of television in about 2 hours. So, we wanted to put the audience right in the driver's seat, make them the killers, virtual reality goggles, so to speak, where you would participate, you would enjoy the ride, and because we were changing format the whole time, black and white and video, you were popping back and forth at random, not always logically.
Visually, it is dynamic, spectacular, amazing. Stone's photographer, Robert Richardson, is the most inventive, audacious photographer working in film at the moment, I think. But it's a classic test case of everything's happening visually, and there is not a single thing of interest in the picture. You sit in front of American television with a remote control and just keep clicking at random, you begin to get these extraordinary, often poetic, often dazzling and very funny cuts from commercials to newscasts to whatever you have, and you just go around, and there's a natural violence in all the strains of material that there are on American television. And he decided to make a film about that, and for some reason he felt that he had to exaggerate it.
I love you so much, baby.
I love you. My impression of watching the movie is you're supposed to think that they're sort of like Bonnie and Clyde were. That they're killers, but as killers go, they're kind of cool. They've got a certain style. They have a certain je ne sais quoi quality to them, whereas they're just like low-life, white trash psychopaths.
There are these two really very interesting actors, Juliette Lewis and Woody Harrelson, who, because they've been so entirely typed as natural-born killers, they have no human reality at all. So the actors can do nothing with it. They must have been as bored as anyone else, I would think.
In Oliver Stone's defense, if you had put intelligent words in Woody Harrelson's mouth, it would have made him a totally unbelievable character. Some people are born to play Hamlet. He was born to play, a shaved-head psychopathic moron, a shotgun.
Hey, Jack! Mickey's back!
There's something going on between the American public and Juliette Lewis that isn't entirely wholesome. She's fast approaching the point where she is now fingernails on the chalkboard annoyance level. But there's something there that I guess people want to see.
Well, the film polarized the critics as well as audience, I think that it's easy to hate the movie and say you don't like it because it deals with a subject matter that is very difficult and harsh and savage, let's be honest. It's easy to say kill the messenger, which is what a lot of critics chose to do and go after me.
Oliver Stone is like desperate that people are going to get the message, even when the message is some way incoherent.
He is the most extraordinary self-promoter. And as the self-promotion has built, it seems to me that the films have become hollower, noisier, flashier, and worse. I like some of his early films. I think Platoon still is a pretty strong film. I am no defender of censorship at all, but if Britain could have been spared natural-born killers, I do not think it would have been a terrible thing.
What do you have to say to your fans?
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Natural Born Killers finally opens here on the 24th of February As preparation for seeing it, watch Terrence Malick's Badlands later tonight on BBC Two. It's a cooler and altogether more chilling vision of sociopaths in love, where Malick uses a scalpel, Stone wields a sledgehammer.